hope you're all doing well, and I'm glad that I get to do my presentation on the First Amendment. I have actually researched a lot about the First Amendment for one of my other classes, so this was a fun presentation to put together. So, the First Amendment is the one that gives us free speech, freedom of religion, and the right to protest, among other things. It's definitely one of the most well known parts of the Constitution. But how it actually works, especially in criminal law, is something that the courts have shaped over time. So let's take a look at how it's evolved. So, the incorporation era. All right, so let's see. Back in the day, the First Amendment only applied to the federal government. So that means that states could basically ignore it, and that changed with the Gitlow versus New York case in 1925. In this case, the Supreme Court said, hey, the states have to follow the First Amendment too, and because the 14th Amendment's due process clause, it kind of became a huge moment, and it just meant that more people had those protections, not just at the federal level. Okay, so when free speech goes too far, let's talk about speech. Not all speech is protected, to be clear, especially if it's dangerous. In the Brandenburg versus Ohio case in 1969, the court came up with a test so speech is protected unless it's meant to incite imminent lawless action. So basically, if you're encouraging people to break the law right now, that's not protected. But just say unpopular or even offensive things, yep, that's still covered under this amendment. Okay, so the New York Times versus United States case in 1971, this is also called the Pentagon Papers case. The government tried to stop newspapers from publishing classified info about the Vietnam War. So the Supreme Court said, nope, that's prior restraint, and it ruled in favor of the press. So this case shows just how strong the First Amendment is when it comes to freedom of press, even when the government really doesn't want something shared. Okay, religion and law. So in Wisconsin, the Wisconsin versus Yoder case in 1972, the court was able to look at whether Amish parents had to follow a law that made kids go to school past 8th grade. So the parents said that it went against their religious beliefs, and the court sided with them. So this was a good example of how the First Amendment can outweigh certain state laws when religion is involved. Okay, inmate rights, religious practice, religion in prisons, kind of a big topic. So, even people in prisons have First Amendment rights. So, in Cruz versus Beto, I don't know how it's said, also in 1972, a Buddhist prisoner was denied religious services while other faiths got theirs. So, the court said, hey, not okay. As long as it doesn't mess with safety or order, inmates should be able to practice their religion too. So, that was kind of a big one. Okay, limits on obscene or offensive speech. So, not all speech is protected, kind of like what I was saying before. So, all right, let's be real. Not everything you say is going to be protected. It obviously can be taken too far. Like shown in the Chaplinsky versus New Hampshire case in 1942, the court said fighting words, stuff that's likely to start a fight, aren't covered by the First Amendment. So, yeah, freedom of speech has limits, especially when it leads to violence or public disorder. It's a big deal. Okay, summary and impact on my criminal procedure. So, this is kind of encapsulating our whole idea, the big picture. The First Amendment is super important in the criminal justice system. Thanks to the Supreme Court, these rights apply in state cases, not just federal ones. So the courts also set limits, especially if speech, religion, or press rights threaten public safety or order. And then with tech and social media, which we now experience so much today and it's changing everything, these rules are obviously still evolving. And it's kind of up to media right now to decide what they are and aren't okay with. But I'm sure we'll see in the next few years how these can reach a more federal level. Okay, these are just the cases that I referenced in my presentation. So all of them are from the U.S. Supreme Court. I hope that you guys enjoyed listening. I'm excited to listen to your guys's and respond to these. Hopefully this helped you see how the First Amendment has adapted and changed so much over time, especially in criminal law. So anyway, have a good day, guys.